Hello, everyone, and welcome to my workshop. This time with Leo Babauta, my dear guest, the proto minimalist, proto habit inventor. I think you invented habits, Leo, and there were no habits before you started.
That's right.
And what is it? Blogger, author, keynote speaker, leader of the groups, and coach,
Mm.
and bunch of other things that I forgot, I guess. Leo, if there was one title you want to apply to yourself, what would that be?
One title, um, Dad is probably the one. If you don't know me, I have 6 kids. Most of them are adults by now, but that's been one of the best, most rewarding roles of my life. So I'll take Dad if you only give me one choice.
Oh, nice, nice. You think it was rewarding for your kids to be your kid?
they they
Oh,
didn't have
sorry, I
much
have
of
to
a
say to
choice.
everybody, Leo, you told me I can bring it wherever I want to bring it, so I will. There you go, curveball, right?
Uh, you know what? I think they would say yes. They're not here to defend themselves, but I'll say yes on their behalf.
Okay. Hey, Leo's kids, if you're watching, let us know in the comments on the side, if Leo is a good dad. And if you're not Leo's kids, you can still let us know in the chat on the side. Where are you joining us from and what brought you to this crazy episode? And what do you want to actually learn from Leo or about Leo? And we're going to kick right off because, I want to provide some value in the first 30 seconds or minutes or whatever time we have together.
Awesome.
And
Awesome.
we are talking about overwhelming task list and how to actually handle it. So let's start with that, Leo. You are here as the expert. So how's your task list, and is it overwhelming? And if it isn't, how come? What's your secret?
It is overwhelming, and it's a mess right now. I just came back from a week off, more than a week off, partly because of getting sick from COVID. So everything I came back and everything is a mess, and I'm like, oh, perfect. This is exactly what I want to work with for the workshop with Alesh. So right now it's a mess, and the thing that I'm reminded of, that I think is one of the biggest obstacles that I wanted to talk about today, is that we are usually really uncomfortable with it being messy and overwhelming. And that's actually why we're feeling overwhelmed, is because there's just so much on our lists and so many messages and emails, and everything is a huge mess. And that brings up a lot of discomfort. What the human mind really likes is order and control and having things in the right place. And so if we can have an orderly list that we know we're going to tackle, and we do things in the right order, and people tell us exactly how to do things, then we feel good. We feel on top of things. That's how we want to feel. Unfortunately, if you are, playing a bigger game, working on anything meaningful, taking on a big project or a bunch of big projects like I am, um, you won't get that kind of order. And that's where people start to fall apart, is that they are really unhappy that things are not in order and things are not easy and simple. And so are we usually have one of a few different habitual reactions to that state. One of them is, I need to simplify. So that's not a bad reaction, but it's just like I need to toss out everything and only have a few things on the table. Simplify. Quit is another one. I just need to quit my job, quit my relationship, quit the projects that I'm on. And so that usually feels really good, because you're quitting something that is giving you discomfort. And then another common reaction is run around like a chicken without a head. So it's just like panic, and basically just be really scattered and constantly um, shift, kind of trying to do a million things at once. And then another fourth common one is the freeze state. And so that's where it's just like, I have too much and I don't know what to do about this. And we might overthink and get caught up in a lot of worry, but we aren't actually doing anything useful. And so that's where people get caught up a lot of times. It's just like they're kind of worrying without actually putting things into action. And that's a free state. All of those are like normal and human, and nothing wrong with any of them. but that's usually where we get stuck. And I found myself uh, coming back this week with a huge mess, and all of that was coming up for me.
This is Coolio. That all of these things. I'm saying Coolio. That sounds like Coolio, but it's not
Without
your
the
name.
coolio hair.
It'd be
Yeah.
cool, no, if it was. But still, what I wanted to say is all the things you mentioned so far. That's and this might be unusual for the people watching us on LinkedIn. By the way, there are people watching us on LinkedIn, on YouTube, on Facebook, and everywhere. There's going to be a podcast episode, so you can't escape this. If you're not watching it now, it's coming for you. You're gonna hear about it later. But people who are joining this on LinkedIn, they are probably used to a very systematic approach, tools, mechanisms, life hacks, tricks, how to be more productive, how to kind of cram more into the time. You didn't mention any of this, so
Hmm.
the main problems you mentioned are completely outside of this realm. Is that
Sure.
is that intentional?
Yeah, well, the most of us want actually, this is exactly what I was talking about. Most of us want a bunch of tips and tools, give me the 5 steps. And those, if you write a blog post or do a YouTube video like that, those usually do really well because people like those. And I'm not against it. I have lots of blog posts like that, so I can give you plenty of tools and tips. But the reason why people like those is because they give you a set of things that are in order, a small set of things, 5 things, 3 things, and that's what our minds want. As I was talking about, and we don't like um, things that are more complex and that will require more work and actually put in a lot of practice. And so if you like want to learn how to play chess, for example, like give me the like one opening I need to learn and like the 5 things I need to do to like kick everyone's ass. But
Oh yeah.
chess, is a great example of something that's going to take years and years of really digging and understanding something and training pattern recognition and doing a lot of actual work. No one likes to do that deep work. So I'm here to tell you, like, I'll give you the 5 tips, but they won't actually do much for you. Um, we just want
that's
those
that's a
tips.
great selling proposition.
Well, they're good, but what you're gonna ignore is the thing underneath it. So like tips can work for a certain amount of time, but like the real discomfort of that's not going away with any tip. And if you really want to have lasting change, lasting like transformation, then the real thing to work with is that stuff that's going on under the hood. And if you could, for example, learn to become more comfortable and be in a more relaxed, open state in the middle of chaos, then like you actually don't need any tips. It's a lot easier. I just wanted to
Okay,
acknowledge
end of the
Luke.
episode. We're done here. Sorry,
I just
go on,
wanted to
yeah.
acknowledge Luke in the comment because he bought my book, The Power of Less, which is something I wrote more than like 15 years ago, actually. So it's cool that people are still resonating with that, and great to be connected with you, Luke.
Oh yeah,
And I see he
and
also asked a question.
awesome. We're gonna go to the question in a minute. I just want to say because I didn't mention it specifically, Leo has written a multitude of books. You can find all of his work if you just Google Zen Habits. You find it. This is the first thing you find. We're gonna talk about it in a little bit and a little bit more in depth, of course. Uh,
Yeah,
so, look, before we go to the question, I just wanted to have like a quick comment to what you said, Leo, because that was I think a
sure.
big or one of the biggest things for me when I met you, when I kind of started looking into your work. These quick tips, right? Five steps, and it's kind of a race to the bottom, and you can see it on LinkedIn and everywhere.
Mm.
There's always going to be someone who's going to give you 4 tips, and then okay, 4 is too many. So I see always these six pack apps programs, and there's someone offering 8 packs, and I'm waiting for 20-pack apps programs coming up. So that's the thing, right? We want to results quick, and that's just human nature,
Yeah,
I guess. And the second thing is, and that is very profound for me, and I'm still making peace with it. I, I'm still not. I still haven't, but that's the thing that's needed. Uh, I know that a lot of people, we want solutions that will fix the thing, so the thing stay fixed, and we don't need to look at it anymore ever. It's
Right.
just done for good, and
Yeah.
realizing that the mess is gonna keep coming back, and we will need to relate to some sort of mess or uncertainty till the day we die is actually something very uncomfortable to accept.
Yeah. And the interesting thing about that is, the thing that we want, the 5 tips, like imagine I were to give you a set of uh, things that will get rid of this problem forever, right? Like you don't ever have to have a mess and overwhelming tasks and all of that. So, one of the tips would be like simplify your life so that you wouldn't have so much to do. Like get rid of things and get out of commitments and stop doing as many things. And that is a good tip. And so you kind of like reduce everything, and then you're down to almost nothing, and then you like learn how to like actually execute on those last few things. And so you could live your whole life like that. You've solved the problem, but you won't be taking on anything interesting. You've shrunk your life so that you don't have to face this problem anymore, and that's great. Congratulations, but you're going to be bored as hell. You won't be taking on hard problems. You're not going to be doing anything really meaningful. You're not going to be connecting with people are messy, and so uh, the result of that is really just shrinking our lives down. The game that I play is to expand my life, and if we expand, we will have this problem. You can't get rid of it. And so I actually think that's good news. We actually get to work, we expand our capacity to be with chaos and deal with really big things. Um, I think that's the direction to move in. And the people that I like to work with are people who are excited about life, who want to expand what they're doing. It's not about producing more, but it's about being willing to like do bigger things, have a bigger impact, work with more people, as opposed to shrinking.
Hence the 6 kids, huh?
6 kids. Yeah, man, it's a training. I'll tell you. You are not shrinking your life with 6 kids. Um, yeah.
I'll give you that. Let's see. I know we let Luke hanging for a bit, so I'm gonna put his question on the
Mhm.
screen, and the question that Luke is asking is, those techniques and tips mentioned, can they be applied in a company?
Yeah. I'd love to hear your answer to this, Alish, but, because I know you've worked in, um, a different kind of company than I'm used to working in, so, but absolutely. So this is stuff that doesn't isn't it applied only, for me, I'm a, for a long time I was a solo entrepreneur working by myself. And so that's like easy to apply the tips and tricks like that. But what you want is something that can be applied no matter what your situation. And you have to customize things, so like it's not about one size fits all, but you're looking at the underlying things. So for example, with the chaos thing, like if you're in a company that has a lot going on and a lot of messages and a lot of things going on, you're dealing with chaos, you're dealing with overwhelm and a lot of messiness. And if you were looking at the tips that I'm talking about, like we haven't actually gotten to them yet, but the tips that I'm talking about could be applied there, even if the messaging system you use is different than what I use, even if like you have a different set of meeting structures or different expectations from the management. The underlying thing is chaos and overwhelm and messiness, and so you can apply that there. You might have to just adjust things depending on the situation.
Oh, Leo, let
Um,
me see. I know you also do keynote speaking, and you speak in companies as well. So suppose you speak to a
yeah,
group of people leaders within a corporation or even a small medium-sized company. What do you recommend them to do as people leaders to, I don't know, maybe lessen the impact of the chaos, or what should they do? How can they stand for their reports, for their people?
awesome question. Yeah. I actually really love going into companies and talking to the leaders of people because they have a real impact in the world. It has like a really big multiplier effect. Um, the first thing is you have to always practice your own stuff. So if you're overwhelmed and you're like running around like, that option that I mentioned, chicken without a head, right? Uh, your everyone else around you will do that. So the way that you're showing up, the way that you're dealing with chaos is going to affect everybody else. If you're really panicked, everyone else around you will panic. If you're calm and you're able to like deal with the chaos in a really measured, like intentional way, um, everyone else will feel that and they will take the lead from you. They might not know that they're doing it, but it will have that impact. I just talked with a leader who she was really worried about going into a meeting where people are going to be feeling different emotions, and like she didn't know how to deal with all of their emotions. And so you can imagine if she goes in with this like tightness about like how everything is going to go really bad and everything's going to be really hard, everyone around her is going to be like, oh god, the leader is like this, and so I need to um, worry about that. And so what she practices like letting go of some of her expectations of herself and just being willing to like trust herself. And the way that that translated is she showed up in the meeting that she was worried about really relaxed, and the meeting went great. People didn't take whatever she was worried about as a big deal, and they just followed her lead. So I would say that's the first thing, is how you show up, how you're practicing with chaos will ripple around you. And then the other one is when someone else is feeling panicked or overwhelmed or stressed, um, what we usually want to do is fix the problem for them. So go in, fix it so that they don't have to feel stressed. And that works to an extent. Sometimes we need to do that as a kind of band-aid solution, like triage and like make sure the person has what they need to function that day. But long term, that doesn't work. We can't go around fixing everybody else's problems. And so what we really want to do is work with our individual reports, and you can do it as a group, but you're going to also have to work with them individually and ask them like, what do they need to be able to like manage their stress and chaos more, so that they can start to practice themselves. And you can talk to them about how you practice, but they need to learn how to practice themselves without you having to fix all of the chaos. So, there's a balance too. You do want to reduce it so that they know what to focus on. They know like how to handle their workload. So you do need to help them with that. But in the end, what you really want is for them to be able to manage that, and eventually like take on more and more of the stuff that you might want to step in and do for them, including like how do I manage my workload? This is really hard. How do I manage all the messages? Like you're not going to be there on Slack, answering messages for them. So you have to like um, work with them to be able to manage themselves in that way.
Got it. Let's see. We have some more context from Luke. So let's see what it is. Okay, so Luke says he asked that because each day he collaborates with organizations and the approach of leaders, head and CEO about time management are strange. Okay, so they have strange approach. So look, maybe you need to give us a little bit more context. How is the approach strange? If it's strange in a specific way, and as you're gonna type it in, I'm gonna actually ask Leo. I'm gonna ask you this because you mentioned the what would be a role modeling of people leaders. You mentioned that they will and do have effect to the team and how the team feels, how the team acts. So how does authenticity fits in? So suppose I'm a people
Mm,
leader and I had a really bad morning, which by the way is
mm.
true, and I can show up authentically, and kind of saying out loud everything that's happening in my head, but that's probably not helping. It's authentic, but not helpful. Or I can just, kind of plaster over it that yeah, everything is amazing. What a great morning. How should
Yeah.
people leaders handle this? How can they show up authentically while kind of providing productive and positive environment for the people.
Okay, this is a great question. By the way, and after we're done talking, I'd like to come back to the overwhelm stuff because
Sure
there's a
thing.
few things that I wanted to say in terms of solutions. But okay, so authenticity. So um, there's a couple of ways that people deal with some of this internal stuff that's coming up for them. Like I'm having a bad day and I'm stressed and like I'm afraid that everything is falling apart. Right. So let's imagine that's what's going on for you. And like my marriage is really messy and like my health is falling apart. So your life is a huge mess, right? The first way that people will deal with that is they will just not tell you. And so it's a holding it in, and it's just like everything is fine, everything is great. That's not authenticity, what that you're talking about, but that's usually where people will start, is like, I need to just not share anything with anybody because I'm worried that's going to stress everybody else around me out, or it's going to make people think I don't know what I'm doing. And so that's usually where people start. The cost of that, as you probably know, this is where the question's probably coming from, is without that authenticity, you don't have real connection. People don't really connect to you. And so even if you're this incredible CEO, but people can't connect to you at that level, they just think, you're a robot. There's no like, this person doesn't understand me, what it's like to be human, like to deal with all of the human problems that I'm going through. And so people will follow a leader like that to a certain extent, but they're not really going to be deeply connected to a leader, not really inspired by a leader who's just basically Teflon, like no, everything just rolls off of them. The other place that people go, if they're like, oh, okay, well, then I just need to share everything. And they will just spew everything out into the world. It's like, oh, here's all of my problems. And you probably have a coworker like this, or a friend, or like they just like every time you see them, they just give you every single problem that they have. And it's just like this long list, and it's exhausting. And so we can say that that person is being authentic, but it's having an impact around them. Number one, people might not think this person's got, like they don't have their life in not in order, but like they just don't have it handled. And so it's hard to follow a leader like that. And the other thing is like it's just exhausting to be around someone like that who is just constantly complaining about their lives. Like it doesn't feel good. And so that's the other place. And it's just like like it's like a fire hose of problems. Likes that. It is hard to trust someone like that because they just don't know how to filter themselves. They don't know how to like communicate the stuff in a way that actually has a good impact. So how do we deal with that? Well, those are two ways, and they're not necessarily helpful to the people around you if you're leading, or if you're in on a team, if you're in connection with people, working with them. And so the authenticity that you're talking about is being willing to share, but knowing what the impact of that is. You're doing it purposefully. So, like, I want to connect with you, so I'm going to tell you about a problem that I'm having. Like, I hear that you're dealing with overwhelming tasks. Let me tell you about what I'm dealing with. And so I'll share with you, like, yeah, I just came back from COVID. Everything was a huge mess, and definitely a lot of stuff was coming up for me. And here's what I'm doing, or here's what I'm seeing about that. Here's what I'm learning. So it's not that I'm sharing the full fire hose. I'm choosing something to share that has an impact. I'm not just giving you every single thing, but here's something that I'm dealing with that you can relate to, that might make us feel more connected, that makes you know that I'm human. And I'm doing it in a way that lets you know, like, I'm dealing with it. I'm getting support around this, maybe with my coach. Maybe this is what I'm doing with my team around it. Here's what I'm seeing for myself, so that you know that I'm not just like, this all sucks, feeling really disempowered about it. It's okay to feel disempowered as a leader, and you can say like, I was feeling really disempowered when I came back, and here's what I'm committed to doing. So there's like a next thing, a follow up on that. And so there's authenticity, but with a sense that this leader is doing something about it, learning something from it, like at least getting some kind of support, or maybe they're just going through it. Here's what I'm doing, is I'm sitting through this discomfort right now, and I'm not going to do anything about it for a little bit, but I know that that's what's needed.
Got
So
it.
there's a big you can see that there's a big difference in the impact. A leader who shares like this in an authentic way is committed to having an authentic impact while not making people feel like they are just spewing stuff all over them.
Like it, I like also I like that you basically mentioned two extremes, right? And it could come in stages. Like it might be suppression first, and then full expression, like oversharing, and then you find a balance. And I guess
Yeah.
everyone needs to go through this journey. And I'm assuming you are not born perfect. Although
No, that's
sometimes I
right.
have suspicions, but
We, we usually start out in the first part, which is the like not sharing anything. And
Hmm,
that's usually out of fear. And so to overcome that fear, we have to start sharing. And we're going to do that really messily when we do that. So like, okay, I'm just going to start sharing with my team or my family members or my friends, and I'm going to share with them things that I would be scared to share. So it's like, I'm like, really dealing with a hard time in my marriage, for example, or I'm like feeling like my whole life is out of order. And so you're going to do it and you're going to do it messily. And then you might notice what's the impact of that. If you hold back, worried about having an impact on people, burdening them and all of that, then you're basically never going to learn how to like walk this path. And the way to learn to walk it is have an impact. Let someone feel, like overwhelmed by what you just shared, and look at how they're actually reacting. They feel like that, then you're learning something. I did this, I had an impact, and I need to like adjust. It's not that that was wrong or you suck, but there's an adjustment to be made. And it's like, oh, okay, what what impact did that have on that person? You might even ask them for some feedback. Um, but in general, you're learning through the practice, and you're going to mess that up a lot. Um,
got it. Actually, I
yeah.
this approach of a journey, and you said that we should circle back to the overwhelm, and I totally
Okay.
agree. So why don't we talk about your journey when it comes to dealing with the feeling of being overwhelmed with tasks? Because as you said, you were not born perfect. You might not even be
Definitely
perfect today.
not.
Who knows? So how
Not at
would
all.
you know you're striving for expansions, doing more stuff, bringing more impact to the world. How are you handling these feelings of overwhelm now compared to, let's say, a year ago or 15 years ago, or even more when you started your journey as a minimalist and more, when you just said you need to change
Right.
your life? If you want to weave in your origin story, now you can. Now's the time.
Sure. Okay. Yeah. Origin story is a good one. So this a lot of the origin story already, Alesh, but I'll share it with the audience.
I knew most of
Um,
it except the part with the adamantium being injected in your but
no
go for it.
adamantium. So I started. I think 2005 actually is the origin of a lot of it. I was overweight and deeply in debt, and a smoker and a sedentary, and I was a procrastinator big time. And so there's a lot of stuff. I'm just touching on some of the big ones, but I really felt stuck and unable to change that. So I started changing things one at a time, and the big one that kicked off a lot of it was quitting smoking. And the great thing about that was I had failed a bunch of times for that before, and finally I won. Like I got it to work. Did a lot of research, tried every single thing possible, and I found a few strategies that worked for that I started to apply to the other stuff. And one at a time, I started knocking down like dominoes, knocking down all these habits. But one of the things that really helped me, that was like life changing, was I realized that the urge to smoke was simply a stress. It was a it was a physical stress in the body, and that I needed to somehow relieve through smoking was the way that I learned how to do that. But it wasn't a healthy way to relieve it. And so if I could relieve that stress through some other way, I could be freed. And so what I did was I learned to meditate. And all I did was watch the urge to smoke really get strong. And I'm like, I really need to smoke. And then it would go away. And if I just watched it, I could just ride out the wave of that urge. And that was actually incredibly liberating because I was no longer forced to smoke. even though I never was. It felt like there was no choice when things got really stressful. And what that did was it freed me from everything else. So procrastination is another one where it's basically like an urge to smoke. It's like, I can't deal with this. It's too hard. And so I need to procrastinate. And so all I had to do was breathe and be with the urge to procrastinate and to avoid. And I didn't need to do anything. I could just stay there and finish writing the blog post. And so I did the same thing with running. So like running was one where I didn't want to get up off the couch. It was like I didn't feel like I'm too tired, and I could just sit there with this urge to not run. And eventually that went away, and I just had to get outside, step out the door, and start walking. And then eventually I was running. I ran like a marathon, several marathons, an ultra marathon. Um, every single thing that I changed revolved around that strategy of not needing to give in to impulses. And so when coming to dealing with overwhelm and tasks, early on in my productivity journey, getting things done, GTD by David Allen was a huge inspiration. I was actually obsessed with it because it helped me to feel like I was getting everything in order, which is what I wanted. What I learned over time was it didn't actually work. It was only a temporary fix. So I got really good at GTD, and then everything would turn into a mess at some point. Usually when I got sick or went on traveling or something, and then I was like, I thought I solved this problem of things being a mess. And so I eventually learned like I was actually trying to avoid a feeling of overwhelm and chaos and messiness. And so meditation really helped me. I started getting to Zen meditation, worked with a Zen teacher. And what I've learned now over the years, so I've been practicing a lot of different simple productivity stuff. The Power of Less that Luke mentioned talked about some of the simple productivity stuff, and we can talk about that here. Um, but what I learned is it didn't matter what the system was. The real thing that I need to deal with was the chaos, the messiness. And so all I've been doing is practicing with that, getting more and more comfortable with it. And the way that I practice is just simple, like breathing, noticing what the feeling was. Same thing I did when I quit smoking. And eventually I'm like, oh, it's not even that big of a deal. So you just like, it loses its significance. You don't have to panic. And then it's just like, oh, okay, not a big deal. Just breathe. And then you do the simple next thing. And so I can talk about some of those. Those are the kind of the simple productivity kinds of tactics. But none of those matter if you are letting the yourself be controlled by this urge to get out of the chaos and messiness.
And I think that's very, very true for most of the fears I was able to overcome, which is
Mm,
not all that many. And I think that the scary part, for me at least, always is that the the abyss feels like bottomless, right? Like the
right.
fear or the craving is intensifying, and it's kind of hard to believe when you are in the moment, or kind of trust in the fact that it's gonna have a bottom, yeah, and
Yeah.
it's gonna subside. I think the good, and it's not even a metaphor, it's a good example that everyone can relate to, is if you have an itch that you need to scratch, right?
Yeah.
It's just getting more and more annoying, and it feels it's gonna get worse and worse and worse. But if you really can't, for whatever reason, it will subside eventually.
Yeah. And there's a way of working with that that I want to talk about. Yeah, but I love what you're saying. When you are in that moment, it's an itch, it's an urge to smoke, or you need to run away from whatever scary doing your taxes is a big one for me. So it's like, I don't want to do this, and I want to run away. In that moment, it feels like there is nothing else in the world but that. Like it is so big,
I just want
and
to say
we
for the
don't.
record, doing your taxes, you meant your taxes. Leo is not
My
doing my taxes, everybody. I wish, but he's not.
Good clarification. Thank you. I will do it for you if you want. I will charge a lot though. But anyway,
Okay, we'll talk
um,
offline.
so anyway, it feels like it is feels like there's no end to it. Like you said, bottomless, you know, abyss, and that is not actually how it is, but that's how it occurs. And what we learn is if we can practice with this, breathe with it, it actually we learn the next time when it happens. It's like, oh, it feels like there's no end to this, but actually, it's not. I know from practice, it's not that big of a deal. And eventually, it isn't that big of a deal. Um, but in terms of the itch, so itch is a really good example because it feels like there's no other choice than to scratch that itch, and it can be really intense if you ever practice with that. And it's a really good, example of the kind of thing that we're talking about. I like overwhelm, and with a certain task that you're trying to avoid is another good one. But it's like, oh, it's really intense, and I just need to stay with it for a little longer. And my Zen teacher gave me an instruction for how to work with something like that. For what she was talking about was the urge to get up off of the meditation cushion, which I had. I was like, "Oh, I just really wanna just stop meditating," and she's like, "That's okay." But when that first comes up, that urge comes up, don't get up. Like, stay with it for a little longer, and then it'll go away, and then, the urge will come up again, and she's like, "When it comes up the second time, don't get up. Stay with it." So if you wanna scratch your itch, don't scratch the itch. One time, and then the second time, and then the third time, she said, "Get up." And I would say the third time the urge really comes strongly to scratch the itch, let yourself scratch a little bit. Not so much so that it's going to bleed, but just a little bit, and then you can practice again. But I found that to be really it's such a simple instruction, but it's so profoundly perfect in dealing with urges. The urge to get up, the urge to scratch an itch, urge to not do your taxes, because it holds us into the commitment of practicing with it just enough. It doesn't make it to the point where we're hurting ourselves. A lot of people want to be like this tough badass where I'm like, I'm gonna like, be in cold water for like 50 minutes. Like, great, go into cold water for like a minute or two, but you don't have to like be this badass every single time. The human mind cannot handle that. And so when you try and be this badass for a really long time, we try and like white knuckle it and try and do things really hard. We will stop after a while. And then we'll be like, I can't do it anymore. There's something wrong with me. And that's because you tried to push yourself too hard. There's a balance to find. Even the best like Zen monks, um, even the most badass like CrossFitters or Wim Hof people, like they have to find a balance or they will crash and burn.
Well, you mentioned Zen, so I have to click that bait, of course. So I know you are launching or relaunching a podcast these days.
Oh yeah.
Tell us a little bit more about that, because that's where we can get all this good stuff and more, right?
Yeah. Well, as we are live right now, the podcast it's launching next week on Wednesday. So it's August 9th. If you're watching a recording, that might be well past that, but it's something that I've been wanting to do for years. Like, as you know, Alesh and I have been working together and friends for a while now. But I've been wanting to do this probably for the last 10 years, since podcasts started becoming popular. And I'm like, oh, I should do a podcast. And then I got more and more serious, and I'm like, I am going to do a podcast. And and then I proceeded to not. So
But you
uh,
did do a podcast. That's confusing, right? You had a podcast, and
I did not.
then okay,
Yeah, I've
that
never.
was something. It wasn't narrated by you. That confused
No,
me
it
a little
wasn't.
bit.
It wasn't mine. Someone else did. Some of my content is uncopyrighted,
Oh,
and so
gotcha.
they created a podcast from it. Um, but I'm finally doing it, and I'm excited about it.
Cool.
And I can talk about how I've been dealing with the overwhelm of that. If that helps. But actually, the podcasts I'm gonna do it in seasons, and the first season is basically focused on the art of fearlessness, which is being willing to work with fear, and train ourselves in the way that I'm talking about, and how to do like really hard things, how to do scary things, how to like train ourselves so that we can actually tackle overwhelming things, things that are usually come with a lot of avoidance. And so I'm going to do a whole season of that. It'll be me talking solo episodes. It'll be having conversations with experts. And then it'll also be me having people come onto the show and share their journey as they're working through the season. So like listeners come on and share their stories, also ask questions. I might do some coaching. So it'll be more interactive season of a podcast than just listening to me. But it's going to be one a week every Wednesday. So please do check it out, Zen Habits podcast. But here's an interesting thing when we talk about overwhelm, which is that I already had a lot of projects on my plate before I decided to do the podcast. And so I was already doing, as you know, the Fearless Mastery program, which is a small group coaching program. I do one-on-one coaching with people. I have like 8 clients. I have a membership program called Fearless Living Academy, where people come in and do courses and have a community. Um, and I'm doing a retreat in October. And so there's a bunch of projects that I'm already doing. And I want to revise the entire Fearless Living Academy soon. I want to launch a new cohort-based program soon. So there's a lot. And then I'm like, and I'm going to do a podcast. And so as you can imagine, there have been times when I've been overwhelmed by all of that. And there's my first urge is, first one is to like tell myself, you shouldn't have done that. That was dumb. And then quit it. So be like, oh, I don't have to do the podcast this year. There's literally nothing forcing me to do that podcast. It's my choice. Um, and I could put that off for 2 more years. But I decided I'm unwilling to wait any longer. This is something that I really want to do, that matters to me, that I care about. And so I said, okay, what do I need to do this podcast? And I made a list. I started planning it out. I already had a huge list of stuff to do. And so what I had to do was basically what I recommend for anyone who's dealing with an overwhelming task list. And so I'll give you a few things. Would that be okay, Alesh, if I just start diving into some tactical type stuff?
Well, you gotta. Now's the time.
I got it now. Okay, great. So the first tactical thing is, um, if your list is overwhelming, start blocking stuff off. Not revolutionary. Most people don't do it. So block stuff off. So the first, for example, I wanted to record podcasts. Well, when am I going to do it? So I started blocking stuff off on my calendar. When am I going to actually record it? I need to. The second thing that I do with blocking things off is, if it requires a bunch of stuff that I might not want to do on my own, I I schedule a meeting with someone else. So it's blocking it off, but in coordination with someone else. So, Amanda on my team, so I'll schedule a meeting with her. I'm like, let's plan out the podcast, like, all the different things around it. I hired a consultant, and so with him, I sit down with him and I'm like, let's go over all the things that need to be done, and we actually knock off a bunch of tasks on those calls. Um, and if there are other things that don't fit with, working with a specific person, I schedule a focus session with one or more people where they come on to Zoom, for example, and we just work for an hour together, and I knock off a bunch of things on my list. And so those tactical things will get me moving on things that I might be avoiding, where I'm feeling overwhelmed. Um, and so I highly recommend that. Those basically, they're all versions of blocking off time, but doing it with others in certain cases. Um, Sometimes the project got stalled. And so when it gets stalled, the thing that I do is I will tell someone else, here's what I'm going to do about that. I'm going to do this by this date. And might tell that to my coach. I might tell it to my team. I might tell that to accountability groups that I'm in. I am in a couple different ones. And so I will just say, this is what's going to happen. I will make that declaration. And then I am on the hook for blocking off the time and making it happen. On a tactical level, um, the another tactical thing that I think is really important is spending 5 to 10 minutes usually 10 minutes. And what I'll do is I will look at my overwhelming task list. I'm like, that's a lot of stuff, and I'll just breathe and do some of the stuff that we talked about. So I'll just breathe, and I'm like, oh, it's not that big of a deal. There's actually only so many things I can do today. I can't do all of this. So what can I do? And so I just pick the things off of the list and I put it on my today list. Again, not revolutionary, very simple stuff. But again, most people will skip over this stuff because it's like so basic. When we're skipping over the basics, we're actually really missing out on the things that make small things that make a difference. So I'll just take 10 minutes. Here are the 4, 5, 6, 7 things that I'm going to do today. And that big overwhelming list, I close it until tomorrow morning. I might open it up if there are things I want to add that I'm not going to do today. Like maybe someone emails me and says, "Leo, do this." Great, I'm going to put that on my list, and then close it again. And I don't worry about that list until tomorrow morning. All I worry about is the shorter list. The next tactical thing I do on a daily basis is I will pick one thing off the list and only focus on that. Again, not revolutionary, but again, most people will skip it. What people will do is they'll switch between tasks. It's like switching between browser tabs. You got 20 browser tabs open, and you're just like going through all of them. That's how people manage their tasks. Is they go through and they're just jumping around a whole bunch of different things. It's ineffective, and it causes more overwhelm. And so what we want to do is we've gone from the big picture of here are all the things that I have to do to the medium picture of here's what I'm doing today, down to the very focused, here's what I'm doing right now. And what people do is they are not good at being at the right Zoom level. I'm zoomed out at all the different things I need to do, and I'm running around again trying to do everything at once. What they want to do is zoom in to one thing and really just be there with that one thing. Before this workshop, I was writing a blog post that I published, and I had 1,000 things to do on my list. All that I was focused on was that blog post. I wrote it, I published it, shared it on social, and there was nothing else in the world. Once I was done, I could zoom out to the medium level again, to the daily list. And I knew that I had to get on this call with you, and so that was the next thing that I did. But it's the Zoom level that you want to be managing. Am I looking at you know the task list, which is something that might be more at the weekly level, a week to 3 week kind of Zoom level? Am I looking at my daily list? Am I looking at the one thing that I need to focus on right now? This one conversation, this one phone call, this one task, one email, one message, and and then there's what David Allen would call like the 30,000 foot level. That's where you're looking at the bigger picture. And so I do that on a monthly, quarterly, and yearly basis. So I zoom out to like, okay, what am I doing here? What is this? Why does this all matter? And this is where I'll like take a look at my projects. This is where I'm like, what are my goals for the year? That kind of level. And we shouldn't be at that level too often, but we should definitely set aside time for that. So at a tactical level, that's how I would manage that. The reason why people don't do some of this basic stuff that is not revolutionary is because of that um, feeling of overwhelm, messiness, chaos that we talked about. This is what people don't want to do, and that's why they're constantly running around and losing the focus level that they need to be at. If you can zoom in on the right focus level, at that level, there's some breathing to be done. And it's just like, this is all that I need to focus on. And in fact, you can even feel really calm about it and just be like, you can even find reasons why these are amazing things on your list. This is stuff that I care about. Like, so you want to remember why they're on the list. They're connected to the 30,000 foot level. There are things that you feel empowered about. There are things that you feel lit up about things that are meaningful to you. And if you've forgotten that, then what you're going to be doing is going through that Zoom level at a in a way that feels like burden. I'm just trying to like get through my tasks. And that is usually what people do when they're trying to deal with an overwhelming task list, is like, I just need to get through this. I need to get through this. And you can, um, at some point you will have trouble with that, because that isn't a very fun way to go through your list. It's like, I have to do this, I have to force myself, and you're going to slog your way through it. And at some point, it's just like, why am I doing this? I'm burnt out. I don't want to do this anymore. And that's not what I recommend. So I recommend that you, as you're going through this list, you're like remembering why this matters to you, why this is fun, like why this is, the podcast is a good example. I didn't have to do that, but I decided like, I want to have that conversation with people. I want to, um, there's something deeper that I can do in a podcast that I can't do in a quick email or a blog, a social media post. And so I want to be doing that. And it matters to me. The stuff that I'm going to be talking about really matters. And I care about it. So when I'm doing this podcast, I have to remember that, connect to that level of meaning. Okay, I talked a lot. Alesh, did this help?
Well, not to me, but hopefully to someone else. No, no, I'm just messing with you. Well, I mean, there one thing to it and one question, I guess, and then we can wind down. So, but the one thing I'm just realizing, actually, whenever I kind of look into your stuff, or work with your recommendations, is how tricky it is to actually do things in a simple way,
Mm.
especially I guess with all the stuff we have. Like I have three screens in here, and there's all this stuff popping up, and this lights blinking. So um, I think it's very easy, and I know that because I've been there, to,
Mhm.
rather than having a simple, scrap paper and write down the most important task of the day. It's like picking the perfect tool you're gonna use, right? Because there are all
Yeah.
of these shiny tools. They have these reminders over there, and they are syncing across devices.
Yeah.
So that can keep us paralyzed, and it's a distraction in a way.
You mean all the notifications, or do you mean looking for
Looking
the
for the
perfect tool?
perfect tool, right?
I got it.
Because
Got it.
that's trying to find a perfect tool is a very good escape hatch from the task itself.
Absolutely. I got a couple of things to say about that. The first one is, yeah, our minds will be really good at coming up with avoidance, distraction. Perfect tools is like a very common one. Perfect system, like getting things done, is another one. So we're constantly looking for a better system. So when you find yourself doing that, there's nothing wrong with indulging that sometimes, but it's you what you want to notice is you're now off of your focus. And so like that's actually why meditation is a really great practice, because when you're sitting in meditation, let's say you decide that your focus is breath. If you're focused on breath, and now you're thinking about my taxes, you're off of the breath. And so like it's a really um, good way to notice, like, my focus is breath. I'm now thinking about taxes, or like, what am I going to make for dinner? And so I'm not on breath anymore. And so you simply need to come back to breath. On our day to day, in our day to day tasks, we don't have a way to do that. So if you're looking for the perfect system, and you're like, perfect tool, you won't actually notice that you're now off of focus. So the way to do it is like, say, I'm going to write this blog post. And then I might be like, oh, what is the perfect structure for a blog post? Right. So like the uncertainty in the task that I'm focusing on will have me going to Google and looking up, the best way to do this. And so, but now that I have a focus, which is I'm going to write this blog post, I know that I'm not focusing on it anymore. I'm now Googling something. And so that's where we want to know is, what is it that I'm actually committed to focusing on right now? And if I'm looking for the perfect tool, is that actually the focus? And it's not. So we need to have a way to distinguish that for ourselves. We usually don't. We just get kind of caught up in like, oh, now I'm doing something else, now I'm jumping over here, now I'm jumping over there, without knowing that we're off the focus. Meditation is like a great example of like breath is the focus. You know when you're not focused. But the second thing I want to say is that working with that can be a challenge. So when we are, like you said, the simple doing something really simply is really hard. Um, and absolutely, I acknowledge that doing is that my. Did you hear a little beep? I'm I
It
practiced.
might that's your tax attorney, I guess.
I forgot to close my messaging app. Anyway, so um,
Not me. Focus, Leo. Focus, Leo. You're doing podcast episode now here in live stream.
yeah. Okay. Thank you. Yeah. Well, and we get pulled off. We get distracted, right?
Oh
Like you
yeah.
said, we'll get distracted by notifications, by looking for the perfect tools. And so a lot of times people will notice that and then think, I suck. There's something wrong with me for doing that. And that's where people get caught up in needing to practice perfectly. And meditation, let's go back to that example, is a great example of that. If you ever meditate on the breath, you'll know how frustrating that is, because it's like, I'm thinking again. I'm thinking again. And then I'm like, return to the breath. Okay, great. I'm thinking again. And so people will get so frustrated with that because they can't stick to the breath. And then they will stop doing it. They'll be like, I can't meditate. Meditation's not for me. And what they're missing out on is the fact that that's actually how it's supposed to look. You are supposed to get off of the breath and start thinking about things. That's how that's how the mind works. We're not trying to be a perfect robot in meditation. What we're trying to do is notice that the mind is doing that. Notice how the mind works, and then practice coming back. And that's the whole thing. And so if you thought a lot during your meditation, that isn't a problem. The real thing is, are you practicing coming back over and over? And maybe you only came back once during the entire, 20-minute meditation. That's still practice. And so if you're trying to do a simple productivity system of like, here are the things that Leo said to do, let me try practicing that. And then you get thrown off of it. Of course you will. The thing that's going to throw you off is the overwhelm, is like feeling messiness and all of the stuff that we talked about at the beginning. And so if you're getting thrown off by that, that's expected. That's how the brain works. And all you want to do is come back to the simple, like, what is it that I'm focusing on right now? And then you're going to be Googling how to focus better. And then you just come back and then you're like, what is it that Alesh said about this? And then you're going to go Google that. And then you're going to watch a video for an hour. And then you're going to come back. And then if you keep practicing that, the simple system actually becomes a lot easier because you practice it. But people expect themselves to be perfect when they practice, which is like, it's like expecting you to be an Olympic athlete when you first start a sport. It's not how it works.
This wouldn't be a practice anymore, right? If you were perfect.
Yeah. Yeah. You will get better and better at it, but like, you know, what I've found is I get really good at something until I hit the next level of what I'm working on. So again, the podcast is a good example of that. I don't know what the hell I'm doing with the podcast. I'm doing it and I'm going to have fun with it and it's going to be amazing, but I'm completely lost. And so when I hit that next level of being completely lost, all of the stuff that I was practicing that I got really good at, I'm now a beginner again. And I get to practice like the beginning stage again. And I'm going to get really good at that in this new arena. And then I'm going to go to the next level and I'm going to be really sucky at it. So I have to like constantly be coming back to that beginner stage. And that's frustrating because I'm like, but I'm already really good at that. I've been practicing it for so long. And why is it that I'm sucking at it now? It's because I'm hitting a new level of fear, a new level of resistance, a new level of overwhelm. And it's all about like, okay, now at this new level, what do I need to practice?
Got it. I
I think we're about the top of the hour. That went by fast.
totally. No, you're right. I think this is the lovely moment to wind down, so we can do just that. So Leo, thank you so much for being with me again.
Yeah,
And
this is fun.
uh, Now I'm thinking about, the breath and your taxes and all of it, and all the other good tips. So as we said, I just wanna say again, in case some of the viewers joined late, Leo is dealing with the topic of habit change and overwhelm, and how to actually progress through life with a sense of calm and peace.
Mm.
And He's launching a podcast about this called Zen Habits Podcast. So look that up. Look up Leo. He's everywhere on Google actually, and his materials are profound. I have yet to find something shallow from you, Leo. I haven't yet.
Uh,
So you need
that's
to
a
write a
huge
shallow blog post.
that's a huge compliment. I appreciate that. Yeah, zenhabits.net is the website, and then the Zen Habits podcast is coming out August 9th. So please check it out. I would love to have you listen and share with whoever you think would be valuable.
Awesome. And if you're enjoying these episodes, I'm doing these every week. So same time next week, we're gonna be welcoming Professor Paul Zak, and he's gonna be
Mm.
talking about neuroeconomics, which you may not have even known was a thing. And The topic is how to extend your health span. Yeah, I said it, health
Yes.
span. So same time next week, join us. And in case you want to recommend this to someone who doesn't like to watch faces of one bald and one rapidly balding man, this is going to be a podcast episode as well. So you can just listen to it on the Leadership Experience Works podcast. That's linked in my LinkedIn. So that's about it. Thanks again,
Beautiful.
Leo, and have a
Thanks,
beautiful day,
Alesh.
everybody.